I felt it was like a paper cut sting.
For 20 years, this Brazilian farmer has been performing operations with unsophisticated medical instruments and without anaesthetic. He claims that spirits of the dead are working through him.
Com 45 anos,
God gave me this mission, and all the work that is carried out here is carried out by God and the compassionate spirits.
Many say they have experienced miraculous cures, but the evidence for this is anecdotal, not scientific. So if they have, is the key their faith or the ability of the man they call John of God? Overlooking a tropical valley in central Brazil is the village of Abadiânia. It's off the tourist trail, yet hundreds of travellers arrive here every week. Their destination, Casa de João Inácio.
There's so many people that come here that the doctors have given a week or 2 weeks to live, and they jump on a plane without even knowing what to expect here.
The Casa is home to a man rumoured to cure the sick. He does not charge for his services. João Teixeira de Faria receives visitors like a doctor receiving patients. But he is not a doctor. He had no formal education beyond the age of 10. Yet, he apparently carries out medical operations. He does so in an environment that is far from sterile. His subjects often stand, and he never uses anaesthetic. Most of his patients report little or no pain, and there are no documented cases of post-operative infection. His methods confound those trained in Western medicine.
I cannot operate like he does and not have infections. I cannot operate like he does and not have a lot of bleeding, and I cannot operate like he does and not have a great deal of pain. I do not know how he does that.
Dr. Philip Bechtel, a neurosurgeon from Texas, became frustrated by the poor success rate of brain tumour treatment. He began to study alternative forms of healing. This has led him to the Casa de João Inácio 11 times.
The really incredible one to me is the eye scraping. You can see the indention on the globe of the pressure of the knife. And I know that those people have not had eye drops put in to anesthetize.
João often treats one part of the body, such as the eye, to cure an entirely different part. Patients undergo the operations willingly, and many report positive results. But how could João be succeeding where Western medicine is not? It's a question that interests Douglas Busby, a Christian minister and trained doctor.
I wanted to find out as much as I could about this man and look at things close up to see if these things were actually happening.
Dr. Busby was offered the opportunity to observe and participate in some of the operations at the Casa.
My feeling is that what we are talking about with respect to John of God is stepping outside of the box that the average person puts himself or herself in theologically, in terms of their spiritual beliefs.
Belief is what brings people from around the world to John of God. Belief and the hope that they may experience a miracle. Roland Knipp has been told by his doctor in Honolulu that he needs open heart surgery to repair a defective heart valve. He hopes João will be able to heal him without the operation. 10-year-old Alexander Seisner came from the Netherlands for treatment of a rare degenerative condition called Duchenne muscular dystrophy, or DMD. Briton Martin Duffy is paralysed from the waist down. He's hoping to be able to walk again. Christy First was in a car crash and is also paralysed. She has made the journey from Florida to Brazil several times. Izzy Salzberg and his wife came to the Casa from Chicago. She is suffering from cancer and is desperate for a cure. Though more skeptical than his wife, he wonders if João can alleviate his depression. Laura von Wagner, also a cancer patient, will soon head to Brazil from Hawaii, accompanied by her husband Ray. For 2 years, Laura has been battling lymphoma, which causes tumors in her neck.
At first, it was just here, now it's here, now it's down here, now it's down here. It's a very aggressive form of cancer. It grows on a daily level. I mean, it grows daily.
Although the cancer is life-threatening, Laura has rejected chemotherapy.
Chemotherapy is poison. They give you chemotherapy, and they see who dies first, the cancer or you. Even if I get chemotherapy, they only expect the remission to last maybe 3 to 4 years. And then they want you to go through it again.
Laura's lymphoma went into remission briefly, but now her cancer has returned.
I don't want to struggle anymore. I don't want to fight anymore. I need to either let go of it, or I don't know that I'll make it.
Laura von Wagner has lymphoma. She and her husband Ray are traveling to central Brazil to visit a healer. They hope João Teixeira de Faria, also known as John of God, will be able to cure her. Laura's doctor, Galen Yee, is not so optimistic. He questions her choice of treatment.
She is going to be spending precious time traveling all the way to Brazil and being away from possibly Western types of medicines that may possibly give her a better chance of treatment. And she may be using this time when she could be here to getting proper treatment.
Dr. Yee's views about the sorts of treatments offered by João are common amongst the Western medical establishment. Some go so far as to say the activities at the Casa de Dom Inácio are fakery. One thing is certain: if people are cured, how this is done has not been explained scientifically. That doesn't matter to Laura. She has put her faith in John of God's hands.
I feel calm. I feel that no matter what happens, I'll be in a better place at the end. So I'm happy. I just feel that being in that energy is going to be so wonderful.
Once at the Casa, that faith will be tested to its limits. Many people come to João expecting an overnight cure for disease, an instant healing of injury. But what they find is that such miracles sometimes need a bit of help and hard work. Christy First has spent a great deal of time at the Casa. She made her first visit a year and a half after breaking her back in a car crash.
It was raining really, really, really hard. And really a car cut me off, and the rest is history. You know, the doctors told me and my family that, you know, I would never have a chance of walking. And really there was no reason to even do therapy. They said just get on with your life and accept it.
Rather than giving up hope, Christy looked for an alternative solution. And her quest brought her to João. If his actions do lead to healing, the question is how. Brazil is at the center of a belief system called Spiritism. Over 2 million Brazilians subscribe to this philosophy, which usually goes hand in hand with a deep faith in Christianity. It asserts that spirits of the dead operate through certain live individuals. In João's case, The spirits are those of medical doctors who were great healers in their day. João goes into a trance, and the spirits operate through him. Dr. Norman Don, a neuroscientist from the University of Illinois at Chicago, has studied trance healers, among them John of God. Such healers claim to have no recollection of what they do during a healing procedure. To test this, Dr. Don devised an experiment to measure the healer's brainwaves before, during, and after an event.
They were in a hyper-aroused trance. In other words, their brains speeded up. And they had a lot of what's called 40 hertz activity. It's roughly 40 cycles per second. It's not exactly, it's a range of frequencies around it. And most altered states that are studied are slowing down. The hyper-aroused, there's virtually nothing in the literature about it. It's much harder to study. And you just don't sit people down in a lab and they can do this. It's more typical of native peoples who have rituals. They'll dance for 3 days and 3 nights, you know, this kind of, and drum. That's how you get the brain faster and faster and faster. And that's the kind of trance that the surgeons are in.
This research suggests that John of God and other trance healers are not simply putting on a show. There are physical changes occurring in their brains.
As far as the patients go, we were only able to measure brain waves on a few of them, and they were in a relaxed state. So their brains were more idling. They were more like an alpha. The brain's not active in processing. Completely opposite state from the healers.
The trance healers can be studied, but systematic follow-up studies on their patients are another matter.
You have no control over the population. It's not a hospital. They're not worked up, you know, thoroughly and completely. After the procedure, they're not re-examined and given scans and blood tests and so forth. You know, that's how you do things nowadays, right? You can't do that. It's just impossible in those situations. So you're really back to cases. And there are lots of cases of people seem to really have had some significant improvement in their condition. There were people I know who personally did, who I think it really happened, you know, had major illnesses that went away. And there were people who went down there and they weren't healed.
But the same could be said of a conventional operating theatre. Patients all over the world often rely on science and faith when they embark on a course of treatment. But at the Casa, the emphasis is squarely on faith. The people who come here, seeking to be cured by John of God, believe, as he does, that spirits of the dead are using him as a tool for healing.
Na hora que eu vou receber esses bons espíritos,
in the moment that he prepares to receive the helping spirits that God has honored him with, then he says a prayer and he says, God, thy will be done. And he receives the spirit, the helping spirit, and then he goes to sleep. He sleeps. He has no memory.
João claims he began communicating with spirits as a young man, when he fell unconscious and channeled King Solomon. Since then, he says he has channeled more than 30 spirits, or entities as he refers to them. These range from St. Francis of Assisi to Osvaldo Cruz, a celebrated Brazilian doctor who died nearly 100 years ago. João believes that these entities have made it possible for him to carry out thousands of procedures. Some are completely non-invasive. Others involve some form of actual operation. Lynn Debenham has first-hand experience of the latter. 6 years ago, João removed a large, benign tumour from her back.
All I was doing at the time, because he came and he closed my eyes, and all I was doing was just with my eyes closed, going, please God, don't let him put scissors up my nose. Please God, don't let him put scissors up my nose, because I knew he did those.
Lynn had already witnessed João inserting a 10-centimetre long surgical instrument into a patient's nose, a procedure he uses to treat a variety of ailments.
João, now incorporated, obviously, came and took me by the shoulders and turned me around to face the wall. So it was a big sigh of relief because I thought, good, no scissors up the nose. And he led me to the triangle, and I stood for maybe about 10 minutes of the operation, and then they brought a stool in, and I sat on that for the rest of it. And he removed the whole thing.
Professor Gary Schwartz, a neuroscientist at the University of Arizona, is a specialist in the afterlife. He has received government funding for his research. Schwartz reviewed the tape of Lynn's operation.
I mean, one of the things that's very clear about this is that this is an intensive amount of cutting with relatively little bleeding. And there's a lot of pulling and tearing of tissue, and yet we do not see this woman showing any manifestation of flinching. We're not hearing any cries.
The initial incision, I felt it was like a paper cut sting, but after that, I could feel everything he was doing, but no pain.
Under normal circumstances, people would be screaming in pain at this point. They would be flinching, and of course the side effect of all this is, of course, you'd see a lot more bleeding.
When I felt that first incision, I gritted my teeth and I thought, oh my God, I'm going to feel this, and it was like, I really thought I was going to feel some pain. But after that initial incision, I could feel everything he did, everything, with putting his finger in and poking around and pulling and twisting.
Any normal individual who didn't want to have physical surgery and then to endure this would also be, you could say, not properly prepared.
And, the whole thing, it came out in 3 pieces, 2 small pieces and then 1 very big piece. And I could feel everything. And it was also like there was a part of me that I could see it, as if I was standing behind me, watching it. But I was fully aware of everything in my body as well, and I wasn't in a trance, I wasn't knocked out, nothing. I was very, very conscious.
It defies any kind of normal expectation.
John of God may be best known for his invasive procedures without the use of anaesthetic. But there is another sort of operation that many of his patients say is just as effective. It happens without physical contact and is known as invisible surgery. Roland Knipp has arrived at the Casa with a defective heart valve. His doctors have recommended an open heart operation, followed by a lifetime of medication. In order to avoid the treatment his doctors have prescribed, he is determined to take action himself.
My cardiologist told me, you can't do any physical activity above 120 heartbeats a minute. I said, well, I can't do anything then. So I stopped surfing, I stopped kickboxing, I stopped weightlifting, I stopped kung fu. So...
Roland has agreed to allow Douglas Busby, a trained doctor, to examine him both before and after his treatment at the Casa. Although he's hopeful and curious, Roland expects neither an instant nor a complete cure. He is planning to see his own consultant for a follow-up after he returns home to Hawaii.
Where I have the stethoscope placed is directly over the mitral area. And what I heard when I listened to his heart was the sound of mitral regurgitation, the typical roar of the blood flowing backwards. His option is really only open repair.
But Roland's not ready to concede to open heart surgery just yet. His first procedure under John of God's care will be invisible surgery. In preparation, he takes part in a session that looks like group meditation. But those who have experienced it speak of something more profound.
Just being in there, my heart just was blown wide open, and the energy was fantastic.
These people are in what is called the current room. What is the current? Believers say it is conscious energy, energy that is focused on healing. The concept makes sense to Dr. Amit Goswami, a professor of physics at the University of Oregon. He is one of several renegade scientists who are exploring spiritual answers to scientific puzzles. and vice versa. Dr. Goswami believes that quantum physics may explain how spirits could interact with the material world, how consciousness might live on after the body dies, and how that disembodied consciousness could be channeled.
In the quantum model, things are not things. What I mean is that the objects that we portray in our world are not determined things. Instead, they are possibilities of consciousness to choose from.
The universe is made up of billions of particles. Dr. Goswami believes that when we see an object, such as a house or a tree, it is only because we choose to see the particles grouped in that particular way.
Conscious choice. Consciousness choosing out of its own possibilities. In this way, there is no exchange of signal or exchange of energy involved.
In traditional physics, there is always a physical exchange of energy. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. Given these parameters, it is hard to understand how the non-physical could affect the physical. If one trades those rules for the quantum model that Dr. Goswami espouses, that consciousness always determines what we see, distinctions between the non-physical and the physical quickly break down.
Our energy and information extends into space, and it travels more or less at the speed of light. And so consequently, the notion of things happening over distances which we call, quote, non-local, which is really more extended, the fact that these kinds of extended interactions can take place, that's the rule and not the exception. I mean, that's why cell phones work. That's why satellite technology works. So once we understand that this is biophysically possible, and then we understand that consciousness is part of this, it becomes completely plausible that the constraints of distance are no longer what we think they were. We have done research, for example, in our laboratory where we've been able to show that people who practice Reiki can affect the cellular growth of E. coli bacteria in a test tube. So we're actually showing that here's a case of conscious intention using a Japanese form of healing is actually affecting cellular function in a controlled context.
Roland hopes John of God's conscious intention will help his diseased heart valve take on another shape, the shape of a healthy heart valve. Alexander Seisner's parents, Edwin and Tatiana, have kept their son at the Casa for over 2 years. They are waiting for a miracle. The stakes are high. Victims of Duchenne muscular dystrophy cannot expect to live beyond their 20s.
The doctors tell you, sorry, that's it, nothing you can do. Then I felt it when he invited me and he said, you want a cup of coffee? I said, ooh, that's bad. And then he told me to sit down, and when he explained me all about the illness, Duchenne muscular dystrophy, I said, okay, so what's the medicine? He said, there is no medicine.
When the doctors, they cannot do anything for you, and they tell you, you're a very sweet person, but we can't help you, then you know that the world, it is finished for you. You're afraid, and especially when it goes over a young child, 5 years old.
We came with the intention to have a miracle healing. We kind of made a commitment, I think, and God heard that we said, we'll not leave the country with Alexander in a wheelchair. We'll stay whatever it takes.
Alexander and his family personify the faith that draws so many to the Casa. But not all visitors are such firm believers. For millions of Brazilians, religious faith is a combination of Christianity and Spiritism, the belief that spirits of the dead inhabit those alive today. João Teixeira de Faria believes that several gifted healers from the past work through him. Thousands of people from all over the world think so too. Izzy Salzberg has accompanied his wife to João's Casa in central Brazil. Unlike most visitors, he is a skeptic.
About 3 years ago, John of God was recommended both to my wife and I as an individual for us, a miracle man for us to come visit. And at that particular time, it was immediately after my wife was diagnosed with multiple myeloma, and which is a rare bone marrow cancer. And I had been suffering for about 6 months from depression and anxiety and lots of undefined fears.
In contrast to his wife, Izzy has trouble with abstract concepts such as healing energy and invisible surgery. But for his wife's sake, and on the off chance that he might find relief from his own chronic depression, he prays at the Casa's sacred triangle.
I'm also of the type of personality that unless it's proven to me personally, I don't believe it. So even though I believe he's helped over 1 million people get cured, it's not going to be a belief for me unless he cures myself or he cures my wife.
Izzy's point of view typifies Western thinking. But shamanism, trance healing, and other forms of spiritism are the norm in many societies which retain traditional belief systems.
Cultures such as in South America, first of all, they're much more open to the idea of a spiritual reality and a continuum between the physical world and the spiritual world. And so consequently, they're going to be more open to entertaining this and also actualizing it.
Ancient spiritual practices and quantum theory both argue for at least the possibility that energy healing works. But if conscious energy is everywhere, why travel to a remote region of Brazil to be healed? Some explain it as a place and a man with particularly good reception. João himself says he is not performing miracles, but is merely a conduit for healing spirits.
The idea that comes in here is that consciousness is taking advantage of expertise available elsewhere than John of God's brain. So where is this expertise? And here comes the quantum idea of soul. Quantum idea of the soul is that soul can exist as character of people that have died before.
It may be difficult to imagine a world in which everything we see exists because of conscious energy. Professor Schwartz believes an open mind is essential.
We used to think that the Earth was flat, and then we discovered it was round. We used to think that the sun revolved around us, and then we later discovered that we revolved around the sun. We used to think that objects were mostly solid, and now we know from quantum physics they're mostly empty space. So what the history science teaches us is that things that we once thought were impossible could ultimately still be investigated, and we could change our mind or change our paradigms as a function of what the data revealed.
Roland Knipp has good reason to feel favorably towards the quantum idea of soul. In less than a day, he'll undergo invisible surgery to heal his heart defect.
Tomorrow morning I go for operation, surgery, and I really don't know what will happen after the surgery, but I know it'll be wonderful.
Like most who come to the Casa, Roland has faith in the possibility of spontaneous healing. Izzy Salzberg remains unconvinced, but he also fears his own doubt may thwart his recovery.
I think it presents a lot of problems because it doesn't allow you to go in a flow of just letting it be and expecting miracles and allowing things to just positive things to happen without having to need an explanation for it. I like to think of myself as a believer-doubter. I believe it, but I doubt it until you prove it to me.
I've talked to some of the other guests that have already done, it's called the current room. They've already been in the current room. And some of them experienced some very unusual things happening in the room. And I'm hoping that something will touch me. But so far, nothing has really touched me.
Why is Izzy's experience different to that of many others? Physicist Amit Goswami has a theory.
It is interesting that belief plays a very major role in all spiritual healing. I mean, even in what conventional is called placebo, belief has a very major effect. Placebo healing is seldom permanent. It's a temporary effect that takes place. So John of God obviously starts with something like placebo, namely belief helps, but something more concrete is taking place.
Izzy, Roland and Laura are all having invisible surgery. In a matter of minutes, it is over. It's an experience that seems to have affected each of them differently.
We walked into the operation room and sat down, and we were told to close our eyes and that we would be surgically operated on spiritually. And we were there for about 5 minutes, and Joelle's voice was in the background. I didn't feel anything, and I was a little bit disappointed.
Roland has had a profound experience. In the hours after the procedure, he felt so drained he was barely able to walk. Only after a full night's sleep is he able to discuss it.
I've gone through neutrality to hope, to the depth of the despair, to just ecstasy. It's been a wonderful experience.
Dr. Busby examines Roland to see if there has been any change in his heart condition.
Just listen to your heart and see if there's been any change. If you'd like to open up your shirt. Sure. Well, do you want my opinion?
Yes.
The murmur is still there. There is still a murmur. It seems to have changed a bit in character. Now, what is going to be required, and is an echocardiogram to determine if there's been any structural changes as a result of invisible surgery, which is what you had.
Laura von Wagner had a distinct reaction to her invisible surgery.
I didn't feel much in the surgery, but afterwards, you know, they tell you that you have all these stored emotions, you know, that are kind of repressed in your body. Well, they all start coming out.
Laura's husband, Ray, though healthy, also underwent invisible surgery. Like Izzy, Ray was a skeptic, but his attitude has been transformed.
I saw these folks with all these different types of healing, and I figured it was just an interesting way that they'd figured out for themselves to make a buck. I would have given our dog as much chance to heal her as a healer. I thought it was all fakery, smoke and mirrors, just nothing, you know, nothing of substance. I feel a lot different now. Well, for me, it just made me sleep for a few hours. But I do feel fine.
Yeah, you look really good.
Ah, thanks, babe.
But the first 2 days...
Don't forget about those 40 days, though.
I haven't forgot.
Okay.
Those 40 days are the period of post-operative abstinence that João prescribes. No spicy food, no alcohol, no sex. João, or a spirit working through him, also prescribes herbs. For these, the Casa charges $10 per prescription. The average number of herbs prescribed is 6. Despite following the rules, Laura's condition was not improving. In fact, it was deteriorating.
It went pretty smoothly, except for then I was starting to experience new tumors. I was feeling one in my head, and this morning I felt a new one on my neck. And I was thinking, well, maybe I'm not going to live. Maybe, you know, because I never worry about it. I always feel like it's okay. I have faith, and it's going to be okay, and I'm going to live. But then when I felt all these new tumors, I got frightened, and I was thinking, well, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm going to die. Maybe I just came here to die.
Then, unexpectedly, João told Laura that the entities wanted her to change direction. She was to depart immediately for Brasilia, 130 kilometers away, to receive treatment from a conventional doctor.
The entity
that was working on Laura through John of God released her and told her she needed to also get involved with traditional medicine.
You know, since I arrived in the world of conventional medicine, my care has been fantastic, and I already knew it would be before I got here, because Major João told me to come here, and he wouldn't have told me to come here if it wasn't the right thing to do.
The doctors in Brasilia treated Laura for a lingering infection from an earlier biopsy and started her on chemotherapy. After weeks in hospital, her health has improved radically.
And they immediately put me on antibiotics, and so that started to make the swelling go down, and then with the chemotherapy, it's just like almost normal now, my neck.
So we're very pleased. It's a progression that we couldn't figure out, but it's worked so well.
The entities are still working with me, and they sent me here, so they set this whole thing up, and I'm still under their care.
Laura and Ray will soon return home, where she will continue chemotherapy. Christy First has faith in the powers of both positive energy and hard work. She believes that a combination of the two will help her walk again.
I had everybody around me telling me what I would never do again, what I couldn't do, and then to come here and live with the hope of recovering and walking again, it changed everything for me.
Christy's friend, Ernie Chu, has been at her side since her spinal injury.
It was crushed, and there was like no doubt, and they just told her really not to have any expectation that she would ever get out of the wheelchair or anything, just get on with her life and just adjust to just being a cripple.
After 6 trips to the Casa, Christy is doing something none of her doctors in Miami would have imagined possible.
The furthest distance I can go to this day is about 100 feet. And I keep making progress and headway, and I'm very thankful for that.
Like Christy, Martin Duffy has come to the Casa hoping to walk again. A journalist by profession, he's approaching questions of fact and faith with his eyes wide open.
You're talking about the visible world that we are on terra firma here, that we know and we can experience and we can intellectualize and we can put in a box, and then the spirit world is kind of invisible. That's a great leap of faith for me. I can understand a doctor and a guy in a white coat and a nurse and so on, and that's something I can relate to, but it hasn't worked for me. So I'm like, well, why not?
Martin is one of many at the Casa who have refused to recognize the finality of a medical prognosis. Edwin and Tatiana Seisner do not accept that their son, 10-year-old Alexander, will die from Duchenne muscular dystrophy before the age of 30. They have been here for 2 years, and their faith in John of God is unshaken.
We all have the feeling that Alexander will be cured, and that we have to have faith, and that we have to have patience. As Tatiana said, it's as also Inácio told me, when I asked, I said, Father, how long is this going to take? And he said to me, he took my hand, and he said to me, son, you have to realize that curing your son, it's like reborning him. Everything we have to rebuild, this takes time. And I was so overwhelmed by this sentence that I couldn't ask him anymore how much time.
Faith and persistence, 2 qualities shared by many who come here. Even though the invisible surgery appears to have had no effect on his defective heart valve, Roland Knipp continues to believe that João can heal him. 4 months on, he has returned to the Casa. This time, his operation is physical rather than invisible. Back home again, he prepares to hear his cardiologist's opinion. With open heart surgery, his only remaining medical option, Roland Knipp has a great deal riding on John of God's ministrations.
I feel much less heart palpitations. And, you know, I always say, well, okay, is it my imagination or not? But I do feel I have less heart palpitations. Hopefully my heart condition hasn't gotten any worse. And I hope it's getting better, but we'll see.
As we were saying, the metoprolol in the setting of a leaky heart valve is, well, the valve sounds like it's still pretty much leaking, you know, so, you know, we're gonna kind of watch it, and we can check an echo and see and compare it, you know, and see if there's any difference.
Roland's heart condition has not gone away, but he believes John of God's work is helping, and that a combination of conventional and spiritual medicine will work.
I'm going to keep on my connection with the healing powers that I connected with in Abadiânia, and of course, keep on with the healing of Western medicine. So together, hopefully, it'll integrate, and hopefully my heart won't deteriorate.
Roland's experience at the Casa has left his faith intact, even if his health has not improved.
It's going to be perfect.
What will Laura's doctor tell her about the state of her lymphoma and her prospects for the future? It has been almost 9 months since Laura von Wagner began a journey to cure her deadly cancer.
Today I'm going into the oncologist, and he is going to give me the results of my tests, and he's going to tell me whether I have a clean bill of health or not. If I go into the doctors and they tell me that I still have cancer, I have a lot more work to do. I'm going to need to take more time with my meditations and really work.
My hope is, of course, that everything's perfect and that there's no more medical necessary and everything's fine.
How are you feeling?
Fine.
Good. You've been doing okay since the last time we saw you.
Yeah, I'm doing fine.
Well, that's good. That's good. No fevers or chills or anything else?
No.
No aches or pains?
Yeah, my knees.
Sure. Now, did you have occasion to talk with Dr. Griffith about the CT scans at all?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
We're waiting to get the results from you.
Okay, well, we're going to give you the results on everything. The CT scans, by and large, look to be okay. There is still some lymphadenopathy present, but it's of a normal size. But as long as they are still within the limits of what we consider to be normal, we feel that that's obviously a positive sign, so things are looking reasonably well there. Now, of course, we sent you over for the PET scan, which is the more, crucial test to look at this. And the good news is your PET scan is perfectly normal.
Yay!
You are at least in remission and we hope cured. But as it is with any patient with any cancer, it's more time that tells us that than any test we can do.
Well, I'm going to say that I'm cured.
Well, I'm going to say this. I'm going to say the same thing too. There's no evidence.
For Laura, the road to recovery has been a long one. What part, if any, has João Teixeira de Faria played in her healing? Right now, there is no way to answer that. This much is certain. Many have had profound experiences at the Casa de Dom Inácio, which they credit for restored emotional or physical health.
There have been a great number of advances in medicine over the years since I've been a physician. There are just some things that we've not been able to help. If there is a possibility that there are other modalities which can favorably affect the outcome of any illness, as far as I'm concerned, it is our moral obligation to find it and to utilize it.
My trip to Brazil was a very important part of my healing process, and it was a step in the road, and it was a necessary step, and I had a tremendous amount of emotional healing
They say here the longest journey is from your head to your heart. Well, I didn't get that at first, but now I'm beginning to comprehend. You've got to believe in something. For 30 years, I believed in a medical model, and I'm still sitting here. Hey, I don't want to say to you, what have I got to lose? I think really, what have I got to gain?